Hey, good afternoon, evening, morning, depending on where you are in the world. This is EFA Fic Live. I am your host, Dark Wiccan. Of course, the Earp Fiction Addiction is the fan podcast dedicated entirely to Wynonna Earp fan fiction, and we are thrilled to be hosting another slate of authors this evening for this live fic read. Kicking us off before we get started, I should say. Thank you to Jeep Girl for coming up with this idea and pitching it on Twitter. I'm grateful that I saw it. Somebody tagged me, and we were able to make this a reality. So the credit for the idea absolutely goes to Jeep Girl. And we were thrilled to have her read with us on Wednesday, and I believe that they are in the audience tonight. So thank you so much. This is something that's going to become a thing for EFA. I don't know how often, but it's going to become a thing. So if you're an author and you're just listening tonight and you didn't get a chance to read on Wednesday and you'd like to do a reading in the future, just know we will be sending out calls for authors to read down the line. We'll figure out a schedule. It's going to be awesome, and it's going to become a cornerstone of EFA because it's just a great opportunity for these fantastic authors to be able to promote their work other than tweeting themselves, self-promoting, and EFA recommending them either on the podcast or on our Twitter feed. So this is an opportunity for everyone to be able to hear these great works that they might not know about otherwise. Okay, so first up this evening, from across the pond, is the delightful author Maiden Star. I'm going to go ahead and pull her up here and make sure that there she is, unmuted. Maiden Star, welcome to the reading. It's wonderful to have you here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to you so you can grace us with this delightful story you've opted to share.
Okay, thank you. So after a lot of my usual indecision, in the end I decided to go right back to the first fanfic I wrote for this fandom. It centres around Waverly and Nicole getting to know each other over a long distance, and in the bit I've picked, they've just met in person for the first time. So I'll go right ahead. As the day gradually cools, although the air between them doesn't seem to follow suit, Nicole ensures Waverly gets a good mix of tourist trap and local haunt. They check out the outdoor art and go to the Supreme Court and Parliament Hill via the canal. They wander briefly around the historic building and take the free tour around the Peace Tower, which, from the top, provides a pretty impressive panoramic view of the city. It somehow looks more resplendent in the dying afternoon sun than Nicole has ever seen it before. It probably has something to do with the company. Waverly takes a few photos of the city, mentioning that her aunt, uncle, and sister might like to see them, and snaps a selfie of the two of them with the city behind them. Both of their stomachs grumble by the time they reach the bottom of the tower again, and, after a brief rearrangement of their dinner plans, given the vegan information, they catch a bus across town to a restaurant Nicole enjoys. They sit in relative silence, their legs pressed together from thigh to knee on the two small seats, and Nicole can practically feel the heat of Waverly's bare skin through her jeans as they wilt in the high temperature of the packed-out bus. It's strange how comfortable it all feels, until Waverly's phone rings and her demeanour visibly changes. "Sorry," she sighs, "I'll have to get this." She picks up the phone with an unenthusiastic greeting, flashing Nicole an apologetic look. The expression changes to irritation after only a moment listening to the voice down the other end. Privacy is hard to come by on a packed public transport, and even though she feels as though she shouldn't be listening, Nicole can't really help but hear Waverly's one-sided conversation. "It's because I'm not here, champ." When Waverly is irritated, Nicole notes, her voice becomes more clipped, the words more staccato. "I'm not at the flat because I'm not in purgatory right now. I told you this." Pause. "Maybe because you weren't listening?" Long pause. "I feel like I probably wouldn't have forgotten to tell you I was getting on a plane for the first time in my life to go to Ottawa." Pause. "Fine, if you say so." "A seminar." "A seminar, like where a bunch of students share their research." She sighs and pinches the bridge of her nose. "I practiced my talk the other night, in front of you. Remember, I was super nervous." "While you were on the Xbox, yes." Tangibly angry pause. No, champ, it was last night. My speech was last night. It went fine." Nicole thinks, better than fine, you were extraordinary. Waverly says, "The flight's tomorrow morning." Unfortunately, Nicole adds to her internal running commentary, wishing Waverley could have stayed a little or a lot longer. We're checking out the city. I'm with Nicole. Absurdly, the sound of Waverley saying her name causes Nicole to start slightly. Yeah, Nicole. She's been helping me with my source material. No, the police officer. We've been talking outside of work and wanted to meet up. I've told you all about her, as in, I've mentioned her quite a few times. Nicole's mind rushes. She has? Pause. Because I remember telling you. Waverley sighs. Look, it doesn't matter. I'll be home tomorrow. Come round at like 5, okay? I need to talk to you anyway. Yeah. Yeah, you too. Bye. Waverley hangs up and for a moment doesn't meet Nicole's eye. It bothers Nicole instantly that Waverley seems to think that she is the one who has something to be embarrassed about. Nicole bumps Waverley's shoulder with her own, and gradually Waverley brings her gaze up to meet Nicole's. This is our stop, Nicole says gently, offering a soft smile and hoping she can pour every "you don't have to be embarrassed" and "there's no judgment here" and "it's going to be okay" sentiment into that one single expression. For a moment she isn't sure it works, but eventually Waverley smiles and they gather their things and make their way to the front of the bus as it slows to a stop, their steps awkward against the motion of the vehicle. In truth, of course, the truth is that Nicole is passing judgment, but only on the guy that's supposed to be calling himself Waverley's boyfriend. Sure, Nicole is biased, and has always had a tendency for weakness around pretty girls. But this guy doesn't know how lucky he is, and, by the sounds of things, he definitely doesn't deserve someone as wonderful as Waverley. She tries not to think of all the things she'd do differently, because it's a pointless comparison. Nicole is still partially convinced Waverley is straight, and she's clearly decided to try and make it work with this guy. Crush or not, Nicole just plain and simple likes Waverley, wants this to at least be a friendship that lasts. She has to be supportive. They walk towards the restaurant Nicole has picked out, and when they are halfway there, Waverley says quietly, "Turns out I should probably be listening to random almost strangers when they give out therapy." Waverley says it so sadly that Nicole's heart half breaks there and then, but she also can't help but laugh a little as she remembers the early hours mistake from Waverley. She'd been so shocked to receive that email, and even more shocked when her fingers seemed to type out her response immediately and without any conscious thought. Like I said, I'm bad with relationship advice. It's pretty much always just dump them. No, no, Waverley says, still thoughtful but biting back a smile as she shares the memory with Nicole. Your advice was good, I just didn't listen. They reach the restaurant and slow to a stop outside. Hey, look, it's gonna be okay. You can take your time to figure out what exactly it is that you want. I know everything feels kind of rushed right now, but it doesn't have to be. Nicole reaches out a hand to touch Waverley's arm in what is supposed to be a comforting gesture. She forgets, however, the current that seems to pass through them every time their skin meets. The skin of Waverley's bare arm is warm and oh so soft. Waverley's eyes dart down to the spot Nicole touches, then quickly up to Nicole's face. Her expression tells Nicole she is searching for something as her eyes rove and roam. It makes Nicole feel exposed, laid bare under Waverley's bright, perceptive eyes, but Nicole doesn't want to look away. After a beat too long to be entirely comfortable, they both catch themselves staring and Nicole breaks the physical contact. She clears her throat a little because it feels stuck on the air that runs too thick between them. To stop her hands fidgeting, she opens the door and gestures for Waverley to pass. We should go inside. Wine. That is what this situation needs. A small amount of alcohol, just for social purposes. Waverley suggests they share a bottle when the server takes their order, and Nicole agrees quickly, letting Waverley choose a middle-of-the-road white. She isn't fussy what she drinks right now, she just needs something with a slight kick to it. Things weren't awkward per se, but something had shifted with the look that passed between them earlier. It was like they'd been jolted out of orbit, stuck in deep space as they tried to regain a sense of direction. But then again, Nicole thinks, as their starters are finished and the wine starts to take effect, it doesn't really feel as though they've been flung into nothingness. It feels like they're on new paths entirely, ones that run parallel and close enough that they could reach out and touch the other at any time. And when the server comes to collect their empty plates, Waverley does exactly that. She shifts in her chair to give the waiter more room to clear away, thanking him as he passes by. She leans forward and her knee bumps into Nicole's under the table. Waverley apologises absently to her, but makes no effort to move her leg away, and so her shin remains pressed against Nicole's even though there's no definitive reason why it should be. So, I have something to show you, Nicole says as soon as the server has left them, but Waverley speaks at exactly the same time. Oh, I nearly forgot. I have something for you. They laugh, and it also comes out in unison. You first, Waverley says, right as Nicole replies. You go. They laugh again, Nicole feeling absurd, like a teenager even. Okay, she says slowly, to avoid speaking over Waverley again. Third time lucky. You go ahead. Waverley checks she's sure before scrabbling round her satchel for something. Okay, well, don't get too excited because I'm on a student budget and I had to get it over on the plane, Waverley announces, clearly nervous behind a fairly well-held facade as she draws out a little parcel, wrapped up with blue tissue paper and a bit of brown twine. You didn't have to bring me anything, Nicole exclaims, slightly baffled at the thought of Waverley doing so. Well, you're being so hospitable today and you've helped so much with my thesis, so much more than was required of you. Besides, if I'm being honest, it's actually just that I saw this and thought of you. You thought of me, Nicole echoes, unable to stop the grin that blooms on her face. Just the kind of grin that threatens to leave an ache in her cheeks if she holds it too long. She wants to hold it forever. Of course, Waverley replies, perhaps a little more seriously than either anticipated. She says it again, like she thinks of Nicole often, and in spite of trying so hard not to get her hopes up, Nicole is starting to wonder if maybe she does. Waverley blushes again and adds, like I say, it's nothing exciting. It's probably dumb, actually. She holds the little parcel out and their fingers brush as Nicole takes it from her. It's from you, so of course it's exciting, Nicole insists, untying the string and pulling apart the tissue paper and a bundle of bubble wrap beneath. The tiny flower pot is weighty in her palm, made of proper painted terracotta and not the flimsy plastic Nicole usually buys her plants in. It's painted like an indigo twilight and almost makes Nicole think of Starry Night, the way the colours twist and twirl together. They were behind you on your windowsill that night we spoke, Waverley explains in that self-conscious, gift-giving way. Your plants, I mean, all the little cacti. And they were selling plants in the shop I was in, but I couldn't pack one. I thought the pot could be fun if you got another, or if you wanted to rehome one you already have. Like I say, it's really nothing, but I hope you like it. I love it. Thank you, Waverley, Nicole says, that mile-wide grin back on her face. Blue's my favourite too. It is? Waverley brightens immediately, shoulders lifting at Nicole's reaction. Definitely, and this will get pride of place at the window, I promise. She packs the gift back up in its protective wrapping and places it very carefully in the top of her rucksack, fishing out the envelope she'd packed earlier at the station and wishing bitterly that she had something better to give to Waverley. But then, knowing Waverley and actually seeing her in her student element, Nicole has a sneaking suspicion that this is probably going to count as a gift of sorts. So now I feel kind of like an asshole for not getting you a proper gift, she begins, and Waverley shakes her head quickly to dispel the notion. But I think this is still going to be pretty exciting. I could have told you a week ago, but I was being selfish and kind of wanted your reaction firsthand. She presents Waverley with the envelope with a slight flourish and watches as Waverley, looking intrigued, slips a sheaf of photocopied pages half out. Realization spreads slowly over Waverley's face. Oh my god, are these... Waverley's eyes dart across the top of the first page at warp speed, an absent smile starting to play at her lips. Yep, that's them, Nicole says, laughing slightly at the look on Waverley's face. You found them? I wasn't leaving the archive if I didn't. They'd have dragged me from my desk still in my wheelie chair. Waverley laughs at the deliberate, feigned drama in Nicole's voice. So gallant. God, thank you. These are going to be so important to my final thesis. You shouldn't be thanking me. I was literally only doing my job. Nicole can see how much Waverley wants to read the records there and then, but instead she tucks the envelope securely into her bag for later. She repeats her thanks, about 3 times actually, before falling silent, still wearing a big smile on her face. Hey, so now I can actually let you into a secret about finding these papers. Nicole doesn't mean to say this, but the wine has made her bolder. Oh yeah? Waverley takes a sip from her own glass and leans in conspiratorially. It actually made me pretty sad when I found them. Waverley's brow furrows in genuine confusion, and it's kind of adorable. How come? Because it means I have less of an excuse to email you while I'm at work, especially now I'm officially cleared for the field again. I won't be in the archive at all. Waverley casts her eyes briefly down, then back up to meet Nicole's again. Oh, that is sad. Nicole could kick herself for bringing the mood down and struggles for something to say to lighten the atmosphere again. But, she says, drawing the word out, the good news is you promised me I'd get to read parts of your thesis, and I hope you're not in the habit of reneging on your promises. It works, and Waverley laughs quietly, putting her hand on her heart. I wouldn't dream of it, officer. And that's where I'm going to leave you guys.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Maiden Star, for sharing that with us.
No problem, thank you.
And everybody, I will be tweeting out links to all of the readings this evening so that you can pick up in some cases where authors are leaving off and continue to read on through the story. Do make sure that your mics are set to mute and that your cameras are turned off. That way we're not accidentally talking over readers in progress, and also we don't run the risk of using too much bandwidth in this meeting so that we can try to eliminate or at least reduce the number of buffering issues that may arise. All right, so
Alright.
welcome back, everybody. We've got Salty Saltines back on deck to pick up and carry on. So Maggie, please do start from the beginning of your story. We want to
Okay.
hear the whole thing, unsullied by assholes. Thank you again. The floor, my dear, it's all you.
All right. Thank you so much. In case you weren't here before, I don't know. We'll start the Yeehaw AU all over again, I guess. Waverly knew Gibson Farm like the back of her hand. Without stopping to think about it, her feet adjusted to the uneven ground on the well-worn path that led to the barn from the small farmhouse where she'd grown up. As she walked, she noticed that someone had finally gotten around to mending spots in the short wooden fence that were either rotting or missing entirely when she'd last visited, and she wondered if Gus had finally hired someone to help her out running the farm like she'd been insisting she would. It had been nearly 8 months since Uncle Curtis died, and Waverly knew that Gus was having a hard time running things on her own. She and Curtis had been partners in every sense of the word, splitting up responsibilities to make sure that everything got done, and their system had worked like a charm until the morning Curtis's long-suffering heart just couldn't keep up with him anymore. Waverly was hit with a pang of sadness as she thought about her uncle. He and Gus had taken in Waverly and her sister Winona when, 15 years ago, their father and older sister were killed in a car accident. At only 7 years old, Waverly's world was turned upside down, but Curtis proved to be a better father than she could have ever imagined. It was thanks to Curtis that Waverly went away for university. It was thanks to his encouragement that she majored in classics and history, instead of going against her instincts to major in something more marketable. If it weren't for her aunt and uncle, in fact, Waverly couldn't imagine how her life would have turned out. She paused and leaned against one of the wooden fence posts, staring out at the pasture where the cows were grazing in the late spring sunshine and letting her mind wander. After a couple of minutes, Waverly was yanked back into the present when she saw an unfamiliar figure on horseback appear over the hill. She couldn't make out much beyond a flash of bright red hair and an equally bright checked shirt, until the horse turned to the side and she was a woman. Farmhands were few and far between in Purgatory, never mind women. In fact, Waverly couldn't think of a time she'd ever met a female farmhand. Then again, Gus was the only woman in town who ran her own farm, so why wouldn't she hire a woman to help out? Intrigued, Waverly quickened her pace slightly, hoping to run into the Mystery Woman somewhere along the path. Waverly greeted Buttercup, the horse she'd been riding since she was 10, with a pat on the nose and an apple from the canvas bag she'd slung over her shoulder. Anxious to get out into the sunshine, Waverly quickly saddled the black mare and led her out into the pasture. As she firmly planted a foot in the stirrup and swung her other leg over the horse's back, Waverly realized how much she was actually looking forward to the summer. Buttercup began walking their favorite route around the property, and Waverly reveled in the peace of her surroundings, while still keeping her eyes peeled for the Mystery Woman, of course. Waverly let her mind wander again as she guided the horse slowly in the direction of the nearby pond, but it didn't wander far before returning to the woman she'd seen out on the ridge. Almost as if the universe were listening in on her every thought, as she rounded a bend in the path and the pond came into view, she spotted the same chestnut-colored horse wandering around the edge of the water, just without anyone in the saddle. A quick look around revealed the rider seated in the shade, propped up against a thick tree trunk and deep in a book. Waverly paused, very abruptly realizing that she didn't have anything resembling a plan. Luckily, the footsteps of another horse caused the redhead to look up, searching for the source of the disturbance. Waverly raised an awkward hand in greeting and attempted to smoothly dismount Buttercup, only to lose her footing and stumble as soon as her feet hit the ground. "Shit!" Waverly exclaimed as she flung her palms out to break her fall. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the redhead drop her book and scramble to her feet in a flash of color. She was by Waverly's side in a moment, dropping down to her knees beside her. "Oh my God, are you okay?" Her voice was much softer than Waverly had expected. As she sat properly on the ground to assess whether or not she was injured, she took a moment to get a better look at the other woman. She'd taken her red hair down from the braid Waverly had seen earlier, and waves cascaded over her shoulders as she leaned forward to check if Waverly was all right. Her eyes, brown and soft, were wide with concern for the woman who had just fallen right out of the saddle in front of her. "I think I'm fine. Ow!" Waverly yelped as she attempted to move one of her ankles, only to be met with a flash of pain from most probably a sprain. Sounds like you might have hurt that ankle, the other woman said, raising her eyebrows slightly in amusement. I'll be fine, Waverly grumbled through gritted teeth, at least until I get back to the house. Need a hand? The redhead stood up and extended both of her hands out towards Waverly to help her up from the ground. Waverly sheepishly accepted the help, her cheeks flushing pink as she smoothed back a few strands of hair that had come loose from her messy bun. She winced as she tried to put weight on her ankle, but found the shooting pain prevented her from doing so. Do you need a hand getting back up there? The other woman gestured towards Buttercup, her own face flushing slightly. Shit, Waverly muttered as she realized she wouldn't be able to get back on the horse easily. If you don't mind? Of course. She smiled reassuringly, a dimple popping out in her left cheek, and offered an arm for Waverly to lean on as she limped around to the other side of her horse. You're Gus's new hand, aren't you? Waverly asked, figuring she should at least introduce herself to the woman she was now leaning on for support. The redhead laughed and nodded. I've been here since February, but yeah, I'm Nicole. And you must be Waverly? I promise I'm not a creepy stalker or anything, she added quickly. Gus just talks about you a lot. As Waverly put her right foot in the stirrup, the opposite side she was used to, she was glad to have the extra set of hands helping her keep her balance. Her injured ankle threw her off as she gingerly swung her left leg back into the saddle, and she felt lopsided as she settled with her foot resting only slightly in the stirrup. Let me grab the horse, and I'll head back with you, Nicole said quickly. She picked up the book she'd left under the tree and mounted her own horse quickly, turning back toward Waverly. We can take it slow going back, yeah? She said, gesturing towards the path. Don't want to jog your ankle, throw you off balance. Waverly did most of the talking on the ride back to the farmhouse, finding that it helped take her mind off her now throbbing ankle. Nicole was quiet as Waverly talked about her courses and her career plan, and Waverly could sense that as she spoke, the other woman was listening intently. She kept her eyes on Waverly as much as possible, and Waverly never once saw her eyes glaze over with disinterest, as was often the case when she got too into the specifics of her history studies. Before she knew it, they were arriving back at the barn. Careful on that dismount, Earp, Nicole said in a gentle, teasing tone as she dismounted smoothly and came around to help Waverly off her horse. Here, I gotcha. As it turned out, getting off the horse was much more of a process. Waverly was able to swing her injured foot back over Buttercup's back easily enough, but putting even the slightest amount of weight on her ankle proved to be nearly impossible. Sorry! Waverly yelped as her balance faltered and she fell awkwardly into Nicole's arms. Her face flushed bright red as she fished her right foot out of the stirrup, aided by Nicole's strong arms around her, and stabilized herself. Go sit down, Nicole said, pointing to a wooden bench beside the open barn door. I'll take care of your tack and mine, and then we'll take a look at that ankle. Do you think it's swollen? It probably is, Waverly said through gritted teeth as she hobbled over to the bench. My boot's probably keeping it down. Nicole worked quickly, and Waverly found herself mesmerized by how easily she was able to lift and hang the heavy saddles, almost as though they weighed nothing at all. When everything was put away and the horses were happily back in their stalls, Nicole offered Waverly her hand once again and helped her limp back to the farmhouse. Waverly sank into a chair at the kitchen table and removed her riding boot from her good foot before she began to gently work the boot off her injured one. As soon as the boot dropped to the floor with a resounding clunk, Waverly's brief flash of relief was replaced by an uncomfortable sensation that she knew had to be her ankle swelling up, finally free from its prison. Trying not to move it around too much, Waverly got a proper look at the injury and winced at the swollen ankle. Ouch! Nicole let out a low whistle, and Waverly looked up to see the redhead had returned with supplies to wrap her ankle. That looks pretty nasty, she said, pulling up a chair across from Waverly. There's even a little bruising right along here. Nicole's hands, like her voice, were softer than Waverly was expecting. She was careful not to touch it any more than she absolutely had to as she wrapped an elastic bandage securely around it and secured it with 2 metal clips. There, she said, admiring her handiwork. I'm no doctor, but I've done this once or twice myself. You should probably get it checked out tomorrow, though, just to make sure nothing's broken or torn. Girl, what did you do? Gus walked into the kitchen just then. Her eyebrows shot up in surprise as she took in the scene at the table. I had a bit of an incident with one of the horses, Waverly said sheepishly. Nicole was just helping me tape up my ankle. Looks like she did a pretty good job, Gus said as she also took a look at Nicole's handiwork. I'll drive you into town in the morning to get that looked at. Nicole, hon, you want to stay for dinner tonight? I appreciate the offer, but I really should get going, Nicole said as she stood up from the table. Gotta go feed the cat before she takes matters into her own hands. She's a sweet girl, Gus said quietly once Nicole closed the door behind her. A little lonely, I think, but she's a good worker. It seems like you two hit it off. End scene. That is the end of the first chunk, if you will.
Sorry about that. I was busy answering
That's
a bunch
okay.
of people. That was terrific, Maggie. Thank you so much. And I know that you have volunteered to read Earp Sisters' piece because unfortunately Earp Sisters is in a location where there's a lot of background interference. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to have Tumblr user Paleo Love read first because they're on a bit of a timeline of availability. So I'm going to actually have them step up to the mic next to read their piece, and then we'll bring you back right after they've finished reading.
Great. I'll drink some water.
Fantastic. Yes, get a nice big glass of water. Okay. Tumblr user Paleo Love, I've taken you off mute. You should be able to speak freely at this point.
All right. Thank you so much. And thanks for moving me around.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Glad to be helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to you.
All righty. All right, guys. I'm going to mix it up just a little bit and go with some Wynonna and Nicole. Here's a quick little intro, what's going on. So this story is about Wynonna and Nicole dealing with Waverly's sudden departure from purgatory, the only way that Wynonna knows how, drinking, inappropriate hookups, and denying what she's feeling. A string of bad life decisions lands these two in a sticky situation that the both of them are content to pretend doesn't exist until the truth is inconveniently brought forward. Wynonna has just faced the truth and has abruptly left the bar that she and Nicole were hanging out in. So that's kind of where this scene picks up. Okay, fine. Nicole threw her hands up in frustration. She took a few heavy steps towards Wynonna and shrugged. Fine, we can go home. No, Wynonna put out a hand to stop Nicole from coming closer as she took a step backwards. No, I'm going home. She put a hand to her chest to indicate herself. She then threw her hand and back and forth between herself and Nicole a few times. We are not going home. I am. You stay here and have fun with Mommy Longlegs. I don't want to, Nicole huffed in annoyance and gave her head a few shakes. Why not? Wynonna shouted the words a little more loudly than she'd meant to. She was trying to get away from this situation, but the more Nicole pushed, the more frustrated she became. She felt she was about to snap and say something she would regret. Because it's what we do, Nicole snapped. Her own frustration was rising and mixing with confusion about what had happened. Why? Wynonna deflated suddenly. She had to calm herself down so she didn't blow this whole thing into the stratosphere. Maybe she should get herself out of this unscathed if she just stayed calm. Because, Nicole let out a defeated sounding sigh with the word and shook her head. It's just what we do, Wynonna. So why is tonight so different? Wynonna stopped herself. She motioned to the bar behind Nicole, then gave her head a shake. She turned on her heel and started down the road. She would meet the damn cab halfway if she had to. What the hell happened? Nicole would not give up. She gave chase, and soon she was close enough to reach out and take hold of Wynonna's arm. She pulled them until the other woman finally stopped in her attempt to walk away. She gave a soft squeeze to show she was concerned and spoke softly. Wynonna, what happened in the bar to make you suddenly need to go home? Nothing, Wynonna insisted and pulled her arm away from Nicole. She closed her eyes and drew in a deep breath to focus herself. She had to put up her walls. She had to pretend nothing was wrong. She knew Nicole would see right through her lies if she didn't put on her mask. After a few seconds of preparing herself, she turned and finally looked at Nicole. I'm just not feeling it. Right, you said that. Nicole folded her arms and scowled at Wynonna. You should know better than to lie to me. Are you going to tell me what the hell happened, or are we going to scream at each other all night first? Because you know either way I'm going to get it out of you. Stop. Wynonna shook her head and looked away. She knew Nicole was right. Damn it, she was always right. She knew Wynonna way too well for her to ever get away with pretending nothing was wrong. It was annoying. It was also one of the many, many reasons they had fallen into this inappropriate relationship. That's what it was. A goddamn relationship, and now it had been a goddamn relationship, and now that it had been pushed front and center into Wynonna's reality, she couldn't deny it anymore. She tried to wave it off with a quick flip of her hand, though. She drew in a deep breath and brought her eyes back to Nicole. Her head gave a shake, and she motioned once more to the bar that was slowly starting to fade in the distance behind Nicole as total darkness set in around them. The damn bartender pissed me off. That's it? Nicole couldn't help the surprised huff of a laugh that came from her lips. She motioned over her shoulder and laughed again. How many times have you punched a guy in the nose just for looking at you wrong? Now you're trying to tell me he said something so foul that crossed the line and caused you to flee? She gave a single shake of her head and folded her arms across herself. Bullshit, Wynonna. What's really going on? That's the truth, Wynonna yelled, sounding hurt that Nicole didn't believe her. Sure, in any other case, she would have punched him in the nose, but that didn't mean she was lying. He had pissed her off. What did he say? Nicole rolled her eyes and dropped her hands from across her chest. A slight smirk of anticipation rose on the corner of her lips as she focused on Wynonna. I have to know the one thing someone could say to you that would make you flee instead of fight. Fear washed over Wynonna's entire body. She went warm, then cold, then numb. Her head shook. She knew she couldn't say it to Nicole. That was too heavy. That was too real. She also knew she couldn't lie. Instead, she shook her head and turned away. Forget it. Wynonna, I swear to... Nicole grunted and used her long reach to snatch hold of Wynonna's arm before she could escape. She gave a tug and let out a frustrated huff. Will you fucking talk to me? He called me your girlfriend, Wynonna shouted as she threw her hands up in defeat and whirled around to face Nicole. Her eyes went wide with immediate panic as she realized she had just blurted it out. She stared in horror for a few seconds as she waited for the truth bomb to destroy her world. Nicole blinked in surprise. Her hand dropped away from Wynonna. Her face went blank. All she could do was stare in shock. She looked pale and expressionless as the words whirled around her head in an attempt to process them. Wynonna's heart leapt into her throat. She felt like she might faint or die if Nicole didn't say something soon. She didn't care what she said. She just needed the girl to talk. She needed her to acknowledge what had been said. The truth was out now, and she did not want to handle it alone. What? Nicole finally came back to herself. Her brows creased in confusion, and her eyes shifted to find a very panicked-looking Wynonna in front of her. She let out a breath of a laugh, and a smile slowly moved over her features. Okay, he was just being an asshole. He knows that's not true. Isn't it? Wynonna again seemed to have lost control of her mouth and blurted the question without thinking. What? Nicole looked a little dumbfounded by the words. We spend every day together. We do stupid shit like making sure the other person has eaten. You leave me those dumbass little notes that remind me not to shoot innocent people in a moment of anger. Wynonna was yelling now as all of her frustration and denial and guilt seemed to be pouring out of her. You fall asleep on me when we watch those lame movies you like so much. You make me breakfast and coffee, and you always remind me not to leave the house without my keys so I don't get locked out. Her chest was heaving as she spoke. Her body felt like it was on fire. There was no going back now. It was all erupting from her like a volcano finally coming to life after years of lying dormant. Wynonna, I don't remember the last time I stayed at my place. My essentials for everyday life are at your house. Wynonna cut Nicole off. It wasn't on purpose. She was on a roll, and if she didn't get it out now, she might explode. We laugh all the time, and we talk about serious shit. We've made fucking plans to go on vacation together. She threw her hands out again and shook her head, almost like she couldn't believe they'd been denying the truth this long. We don't go home with anyone else because we have each other. We get drunk and... No, Nicole, no. Wynonna's tone softened just slightly and her hands dropped. Her eyes focused on the woman in front of her, and the urgency to push all of her words out before she exploded faded. A fondness for who she was looking at crept over her features, and she let out the tiniest laugh as she spoke. I haven't been drunk with you in weeks. Neither have you. Nicole opened her mouth to deny it, but stopped. She'd never been a great liar, and now was certainly not the time to start, especially when she'd been encouraging Wynonna to be so honest with herself. She let out a defeated-sounding sigh and dropped her eyes to her feet. Yeah, I haven't been drunk in a while. Then what are we doing? Wynonna stepped closer and tucked her hand under Nicole's chin. She eased her hand up until Nicole's face moved along with it. When she was finally met with the other woman's eyes, she gave her head a shake and spoke in a trembling whisper. Because I think we're dating, whether you want to admit it or not. No, Nicole pushed Wynonna away and shook her head quickly. She turned her back on her friend and put a hand to her face. She pushed the pads of her fingers into her closed eyes and drew in a slow breath through her nose. This wasn't real. This was not happening. It couldn't be happening. No? Winona coughed out the word in disbelief and took a timid step towards Nicole. What do you mean, no? No. Nicole whirled around and said, Winona with a glare. It was meant to look mean, fierce, angry. Instead, it felt flat, and she looked terrified. Her head shook once, and when she spoke, her words trembled. She drew in a sharp breath and shrugged. We can't do this. Dude, I know. Winona lifted her hands between them, as if to say she felt just as powerless as Nicole did. I fucking know, all right? But her hands fell now, and she shrugged her shoulder as her other hand pushed back through her hair. Fuck it, Nicole. We are actually doing this. Can you tell me honestly? Winona cut off the predictable excuse Nicole was about to throw out there. She took another step towards the woman and spoke gently. That you haven't been happy in the past few months? That none of this has actually been real? That you have still been using me to squash down your heartbreak? Fuck you, Winona, Nicole growled. She was outward fighting, accepting the unavoidable truth of the situation. Fuck you, hot. Winona threw her left hand out to the side as if batting away Nicole's misplaced anger. You preach about honesty, self-awareness, and self-acceptance, but here you are being a goddamn coward when the focus is turned on you. Winona, you're a fucking hypocrite is what you are. Winona growled the word and took another step towards Nicole. They were nearly chest to chest now, and Winona lowered her tone since there was no need to speak loudly with them being so close. Do it. Look at me in the eyes and lie to me. Tell me this isn't what we're doing, and I will walk away forever. Nicole's eyes lifted slowly, taking in every inch of Winona she could see in the path of her gaze before it fell on her face. She locked eyes with the woman and felt her entire body shudder. There was an unexpected fire, intensity in Winona's eyes. She wasn't sure she had ever seen her friend with that look. She wasn't sure she had ever been looked at that way. She swallowed the lump that had formed in her throat and let out a shaky breath as her hand lifted to the back of Winona's head, and she quickly closed the short gap between their lips to push a desperate kiss against her mouth. Winona's hand moved to grip the front of Nicole's coat as she returned the kiss. Relief flooded her body. She was terrified. She had been scared for so long about what they were doing and how it would end. She still was. They had every reason not to do this. They had everything in the world telling them they shouldn't. Yet here they were, and Winona knew now, at last, they weren't alone. And that's it.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Yeah. So just a quick note, Andy's phone, we're picking up some sound from you. I just kind of be aware that I've got you muted now, but for some reason you kind of keep coming on and off mute. So just be aware. Guys, thank you so much for coming back in and tuning in to listen to our fantastic authors read. Yeah, Janie, you did a fantastic job. Nothing but cheers and applause coming from the chat. So great work. And I know that you're under a bit of a time schedule and you need to get going, but thank you again so much for joining us and putting up with the dramas that happened in the first hour.
Thank you for making it work. I'm going to stick around for a little bit longer.
Okay, sounds great. Awesome. Okay. All right. So next up, we're actually going to bring Maggie back on. She is going to read on behalf of the author Earp Sisters 22, who is in a rather loud location, so they're not able to read themselves. So Maggie, I've turned your mic back on.
Hello.
Hello. Did you get that drink of water?
I did.
Fantastic. Good. Glad to hear it. Well, I'm going to take myself off mic and camera this time. Sorry, everybody. And I'm sorry I had to stare at my lovely gob while Janie was reading before. But I'm going to turn the floor back over to you so you can read the story from Earp Sisters 22.
All right. Editor's note. I'm super excited. I love this series. So this is a story called 3, and it is part of the Stay series. Waverly. 18, 19, 20. Waverly releases Ariel's hand as she finishes counting aloud the number of fish on the worksheet her teacher, Mrs. Lovejoy, sent home. The tiny redhead picks up her pencil and looks up at her foster mother with wide eyes. She drags her finger to the right of the fish to a diagram of 17 sailboats, and presses a button on her iPad with her right hand. It's 9:03 in the morning, and Ariel's red hair is tied into a poofy bun from the night before, and she dons her purple Vampirina pajama top and blue Paw Patrol pajama bottoms. It's a quarantine fashion statement. 17, the augmentative alternative communication device boasts. Waverly raises an eyebrow and stops to count the sailboats in her head. You're right, baby. 17. 17 of what? Ariel swipes across the iPad, past people and places, until she finds vehicles. Not bus or train. Boat. Waverly brings the palm of Ariel's hand to her cheek. You are awesome sauce, Ariel. 5-year-old Ariel puts down the iPad and moves to snuggle on her mama's lap. Ever since homeschool started because of the germs, she's learned that snuggling means no more math. Ariel hands the pencil to her mama. Wavy. She holds up her arms and flicks her palms outward towards her. All done. All done? Waverly writes 20 and 17 on the worksheet. In the past 30 minutes since Nicole left for the station, Ariel's shown zero interest in the sensory bin she created from Rainbow Rice and pom-poms, or Mrs. Lovejoy's digital lessons. Instead, she's asked for puppy dog pals and coloring and Coco on her iPad. Waverly sighs in defeat. They can't leave the homestead, and she's not going to force Ariel to do school all day. In her own way, she thinks, and she and Nicole discussed this last night, they're blessed that Ariel doesn't understand and doesn't need to understand the calamity going on in the outside world, or why Waverly is her new teacher. Ariel makes her left hand into a fist and shakes it up and down. Yes. She unlocks the iPad. I want a break. 12 math problems on a Monday morning for a 5-year-old seems excessive, so Waverly gives in. Bolt, Ariel's service dog, heels at his little master's feet as she leans on him to leave the dining room table and head toward the couch to pick up her beloved Rapunzel doll. Ariel speaks to the doll in a language Waverly will never understand, but wishes she could. Then she has an idea. She doesn't know if she's playing the role of clingy fiancé. Nicole left 30 minutes ago. Doc and Alice and Winona are out on emergency business. She's thankful for her big sister, who is battling the lines at the grocery store to bring home a stockpile of Sesame Street broccoli and cheese nuggets. Lately, it's the only meal Ariel will eat without crying or spitting it out all over the table. Stevie, Doc and Winona's baby girl, is sleeping soundly in her bassinet next to the table. Waverly grins down at the sleeping baby. Your mama and daddy are going to have to wash their hands really good before they come back in. 3 pumps of hand sanitizer, too. Wash those yucky germs away. Waverly pulls her iPhone out of her pajama pants and sits on the couch next to Ariel and Bolt. Immediately, Ariel snuggles into her side, but doesn't take her eyes off her beloved Rapunzel doll. It's sort of funny, but sad, that Rapunzel was in quarantine too. Do you want to call Nicole, baby? Ariel's head pops up at the mention of her favorite person in the world. Waverly knew it would do the trick. She's going to yell at us and tell us to get back to work. You know that, cutie. Waverly types the number that she knows by heart, and the familiar FaceTime jingle starts. Nicole's pixelated face fills the screen, and Ariel nearly jumps into Waverly's lap. Coco! Nicole. Nicole chuckles as Ariel's face fills her phone screen. Hi, princess! She leans her phone against her desktop computer and yawns. Sleeping on the job, Sheriff Hot? That's not good. Waverly giggles and Nicole grins. You're a tease, and I'm not sleepy, just hungry. Another yawn escapes her mouth. Ariel must have handed the phone to Waverly because Nicole can see her fiancé giving her a look. Nicole is tired. She's tired and scared of leaving her home with a nasty virus at large. She's tired of patrolling the desolate streets, telling people to please stay inside. She has to protect the people of Purgatory, though. Most importantly, Nicole thinks she needs to protect her family. Hungry. I want donut. Pink. Sprinkles. The robotic voice from the iPad takes Nicole out of her trance. Waverly speaks softly through the phone. I know you're tired, baby. When you come home, we'll take a nice long bath and relax, and that sounds nice, Waves. Thank you. I love you. I love you too, Nicole. Hungry. I want donut. Pink. Sprinkles. Waverly pulls Ariel onto her lap. A donut? Really? You're going to make Coco go all the way to Tim Hortons to buy you a donut on her way home? Donut. Ariel tosses the iPad to the side, touches Waverly's face with both her hands, and gazes into her eyes. Coco's on the case. Anything for my princess. Ariel. Waverly says that they need to do something nice for Nicole since she's bringing home donuts. Something nice usually means a card or a picture. She sets a paint set and paper in front of Ariel and a paintbrush. Ariel watches as the colors swirl together on the paper. Red and yellow make orange, and green and blue make purple. But when she puts too many coats on top of each other, the paint tears through the paper and goes onto the kitchen table. Waverly never gets mad. By the time she's through with painting herself and her mother's, both she, Bolt, and the table are covered in watercolor. Oh God, Auntie No-No says when she sees her. Ariel's eyes drift towards the shopping bag in her aunt's hand. Broccoli and cheese nuggets. Baby girl, Ariel's made a masterpiece. Alice peers out from behind Winona. Ariel's made an MESS. No one can figure out what she's painted. Alice asks her if it's a bag of potatoes, and Uncle Doc asks if it's Buttercup the goat. Ariel hates that she doesn't have the right words to tell them because her iPad is in the other room. 3, Ariel says. 3? Alice scratches her head, but Ariel knows she didn't follow the rules. 3, 3, 3. Ariel pouts and puts down her paintbrush as Waverly rushes into the room with Lysol and begins to spray the kitchen. As Alice pinches her nose, Ariel mutters, 3. She's right, you know. She's trying to tell you that you were supposed to use 3 pumps of hand sanitizer when you came in. Ariel loves her Wavy because her Wavy always knows what she's trying to say. Oh, thanks for reminding me, Ariel. Alice takes 3 pumps from the container on the counter and rubs her hands together. Family. 3 hours later, Ariel stands at the doorway with the hand sanitizer, Bolt at her side. Waverly's next to her with the can of Lysol. They're ready. You're absolutely insane, Winona grimaces but tries not to smile as she holds Stevie to her chest. Even Stevie's laughing at you. The baby coos and blinks her beautiful almond-shaped eyes. 3, 3, 3, Ariel chants softly. Waverly grins. Nicole is going to be so proud that their girl is using her words. As Nicole walks up the porch, Ariel tumbles into her arms, Bolt at her side. There's my princess! Nicole picks Ariel up, and the little girl settles into her foster mother's touch. 3, Cole, 3. Yes, the hand sanitizer gets on Nicole's uniform, and yes, it smells sickeningly sharp. But it's being delivered to her by one of her favorite people in the world. She pulls Waverly in for a hug as the Lysol can falls on the porch. Waverly stands on her tippy toes and gives Nicole a soft kiss and places one on Ariel's cheek. Nicole loves her girls and vows to keep them safe during this trying time. Ariel takes Nicole's face in between her hands. Wash hands, Co. Your mama taught you well, princess, she says. It's a dinner full of pink sprinkled donuts and broccoli and cheese nuggets, which, Nicole will admit later, don't taste half bad. Ariel's masterpiece rests on the porch. At bedtime, Ariel uses her device to say goodnight to her foster mothers in a way in which only she knows how. Picture, Nicole, Waverly, Ariel, family. She knows. She knows they'll keep her safe from the germs. She knows they'll stay. And that's the end.
Oh, that was delightful. That was so sweet. Oh, we really needed that fluff. We really needed that fluff. Thank you so much for reading on Earp Sisters 22's behalf, Maggie. I really, really appreciate it. You did a fantastic job. Did you mute yourself already?
Yes, I did mute myself, but
you did, okay.
I was super glad. I was super happy to be able to read it because this is such a wonderful series.
Yes, it really is. It's a fantastic series, and I think that Earp Sisters 22 does such a wonderful job of tackling the joys and difficulties and obstacles of having a child with special needs. And I mean, with the cutest child with special needs in the world.
Indeed.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much, Maggie. I think
Yeah.
we're going to move along to our next author now. Coming up to the microphone, it is the fantastic L. Grace B. I'm taking you off of mute now. Thank you for allowing us to shuffle the times around a little bit, obviously, because of things that happened earlier. We couldn't help but shuffle the times around, so I appreciate you shifting your spot a little later so that we could have Tumblr user Paley Love read a little early as far as the timeline goes. So thanks for that.
Yeah, it's no problem. I'm happy to be here. Not like I'm doing anything. Not like I have much of a schedule right now. So,
Yeah, I know. What a weird time we're living in, right?
such
Okay.
a weird time.
Well, speaking of time, this is yours. So please step up to the mic and, oops, I just hit my mic. Sorry, everybody. And read us your story.
All right. I'm going to continue on the fluff train that we've apparently jumped on, which I think we all need. And I am going to be reading a story called Here We Are, My Arms Are Open Wide. And it's an older-ish story. It's about 2 years old. And it takes place between the time between season 2 and season 3. And it's just a nice little way hot one shot. It starts with a sticky note covered in neat, curvy handwriting. It's there when Nicole strolls tiredly into the bullpen at 6 a.m., coming off an uneventful late-night patrol. It's stuck to the cover of her planner, the first place she always looks when returning to her desk. Dinner Saturday night? Takes her a minute to register the note, her body already begging for sleep. She runs through her schedule in her head, 2 more night shifts, then 3 days off. It's 3 words that are simple, but they make Nicole's heart swell. She wanders down to the Black Badge office, the morning light beginning to stream through the back windows. She fishes through Waverly's exceptionally organized desk, yanking out a bright green sticky note. She quickly finds a pen and scratches out a response in her tight, neat handwriting, hoping its recipient will feel the same amount of levity, of hope, of normalcy. Pick you up at 6:30. It's been 4 weeks since they sent Alice away. They mostly spend them going through the motions. Nicole goes back to work, keeping the drunks off the road, seeing the calls of missing animals and escaped livestock. All is quiet for the most part. Nothing that couldn't be tamed by the demon-grade bug spray Jeremy cooks up. Nothing requiring a demon-killing gun or its rifle wielder. Winona is still gone. Nearly without a trace, just a note hastily scrawled with the words, "I'll be back, I promise." Nicole found Waverly standing in the middle of the kitchen of the homestead, holding the note in a shaking hand, trying to stifle the sobs bubbling in her chest. She barely gets her arms around her before Waverly collapses to the floor. They stay there for an hour, Nicole holding Waverly, stroking her hair, letting her soak her shirt with tears. Over and over, she keeps telling Waverly the only thing that comes to mind. She'll be back, I promise. It takes them 4 weeks to relax and realize they chose to be with each other, demons or not. They better make the most of it. Things are okay. They feel like they get to start over. They know their lives will never be normal, but they try. A dinner date with your girlfriend is normal. After everything that's happened, they both feel like they owe it to each other. Quiet, peace, taking time for one another, spending time with each other when they don't also have to chase demons or delay the end of the world. So when Nicole strolls into Shorty's the next day when she's on her dinner break, there's a tight knot of guilt settled in her stomach. She tells Waverly they have to cancel their date night. Lonnie called in sick with the flu and schedules were shifted around. She's now working the evening shift for the whole weekend. But Waverly's eyes are kind and forgiving, and she leans over the counter and cuts off Nicole with a sweet kiss. When she leans back, she tucks a strand of bright red hair behind Nicole's ear, her hand resting on her cheek. We'll make it work. It's been 4 weeks, and Waverly and Nicole have hardly spent a day apart. There's still a lingering fear and desperation, though, like the world can still end at any moment. An uneasiness about the other when one is called out of the safety of the sheriff's office or the homestead. Too much relief when the other comes home, always without a scratch. After Winona's departure, Waverly is hesitant to stay over at Nicole's place, fearful that Winona will return and will need her. except for one night when the nightmares get too bad and Waverly keeps jolting awake in a cold sweat. Nicole is always there, awake from her own nightmares, the crescent-shaped scar along her left wrist still waking her with an unexpected twinge. It's 2 a.m, but Nicole drives them back to her place and they curl into each other in the middle of Nicole's bed. Nicole holds a trembling Waverly tightly, just enough so that Nicole won't fall apart either. Nicole presses a kiss to Waverly's forehead as she sobs into her chest. They hold each other all night. But for the first time in weeks, Waverly sleeps soundly, because Nicole's house is starting to feel like home too. Nicole shuffles back into the station, rubbing her eyes, running a hand through her hair. After a long, then she stopped in her tracks a few feet short of her desk. Her heart skips a beat when her eyes land at the person currently occupying her chair. The person who should be back at the homestead, asleep in the bed that Nicole can't wait to crawl into. Except she's not. She's here. Hey, you. Hey, says Nicole tiredly. What are you doing here? What is this? Waverly holds up a grease-stained brown paper bag with a burger printed on the side, a sheepish grin on her face. Pretty sure we had a date tonight. They end up pulled off to the side of the road, parked in a field a few miles outside the Purgatory sign. The roads are empty. They have the world to themselves. They have milkshakes, Waverly chocolate, Nicole vanilla, and a giant bag of curly fries to share between them. They take the shell off the back and stretch out in the bed of the Jeep. It's not that fancy Thai place in the big city that Waverly's been raving about for weeks, but somehow it still feels like Waverly had planned this all along. Nicole thinks it's perfect. They spend a good part of the night talking. Just talking. Not about demons or curses or cults. Instead, it's favorite school subjects, their dream jobs when they were kids. They laugh and tease each other over favorite songs from middle school. Too many times their hands brush as they reach into the bag at the same time. More than once, Nicole gets brain freeze from slurping down her shake too fast. Waverly is there with a kind, teasing smile rubbing her back. They steal sweet and salty kisses. You've always tasted like vanilla, Waverly says when she breaks off a kiss, a smile pulling at the corners of her mouth. Nicole responds by leaning in to capture Waverly's lips with her own. It's longer than the others they've shared because Nicole needs to remember how it felt kissing her the first time and every time. Not that she could forget. They break apart and they're still close enough that Nicole sees how the moonlight catches Waverly's eyes. She swears she can see entire galaxies. Baby, you've always tasted like the sunset. Waverly leaves the car radio on low. They're talking about their dream houses when she stops mid-sentence. Oh, I love this song. Nicole turns her head, straining to hear the song, listening to the soothing pulse of the piano notes floating from the speakers. I don't know that I've heard it. Waverly isn't listening. Her eyes are closed and she hums along to the first verse. Nicole closes her eyes too, letting the soft, low notes wash over her. The song does sound familiar. Dance with me? Nicole laughs bemusedly, but when she glances over to Waverly, she's met with a sincere, pleading look on her face. She holds out her hand. Nicole takes it. They climb out of the Jeep, Waverly first, then Nicole. They don't let go of each other. After she gains her footing, Nicole pulls Waverly close to her, a hand settling on the small of her back. Waverly slides her free hand up Nicole's chest and lays it on Nicole's shoulder. Nicole rests her forehead against Waverly's. She closes her eyes. And they dance. Blades of grass brush against their calves in time with the song as they sway back and forth. You know why I love this song? It's barely a whisper. Nicole hums in response. It sounds like walking into a room and meeting the love of your life. Like you've been waiting your whole life for this person. And then there they are. Nicole feels her chest inflate as her mind races back to the time before now, before the curse and the demons, to walking into a bar and seeing a girl. Last time I heard this song, Waverly takes a pause, was the day I took you into Nedley's office and kissed me so hard we fell onto the couch in my boss's office. Waverly ducks her head and leans it against Nicole's chest. Nicole just laughs and plants a kiss on the top of her head. The song begins to fade. You know what, though? Nicole leans back, catching Waverly's chin with her finger, lifting it up so they can lock eyes. I think I heard that song then, too. They climb back into the Jeep and they settle into an easy silence, one that isn't filled with desperation or worry or doubt. The sky is a clear blanket of stars above them. Crickets provide the score. Coyotes howl their nightly business back and forth. For once, it's not cold. Spring is giving way to summer, the warmer evenings and cool, dewy mornings. Every so often, though, a fierce breeze comes in from the north and catches them off guard. Nicole gives an involuntary shiver, and Waverly reaches over the back seat, pulling out a wool blanket. She drapes it over the both of them. Waverly curls into Nicole's side. She leans her head against her chest, not caring that Nicole is still in her working uniform or hasn't showered. Nicole's arm instinctively finds its way around Waverly, her hand resting just above her hip. Usually I'm the one freezing, Waverly chuckles to herself, her breath tickling Nicole's neck. Nicole just snuggles further under the blanket. I thought you were supposed to be the smart one, Waverly Earp. She leans in, her nose brushing against Waverly's before meeting Waverly's lips with hers. They linger there, foreheads pressed, lips no longer touching, breathing one another in. The wind mixes vanilla and lavender. I love you. She's trying to say it more because she means it. I love you too. She hears it more because she means it. Nicole's head snaps up, her neck protesting the awkward angle it had been resting at for however long she was asleep. For a moment, she forgets where she is, but then she registers the familiar sensation of another body against her side and relaxes. Waverly's still sound asleep, her breathing gentle and even. Her arm is still draped across Nicole's abdomen. Nicole lays her hand on top of Waverly's, planting a kiss to her forehead. She blinks a few more times, her eyes adjusting to the changing light. The horizon is rimmed with a milky light, signaling the inevitable arrival of a new day. She can still feel sleep and reality pulling at her. She still needs to go home, to shower, to feed the cat, get ready to go to work again. She'll need to wake Waverly soon. She knows that they might have to fight a demon tomorrow, or Winona will return to purgatory and they have to hit the ground running again, trying to break the curse. Or she'll finally catch the kid who's been stealing cigarettes from the gas station. She knows that she will give Waverly that fancy dinner in the city. They will give each other lazy Sunday mornings when they stay in bed far too long. They have years to give each other, maybe filled with a house of their own and pets and kids. But for now, this little moment of normalcy feels enough. Hey, baby. She nudges Waverly gently. Wake up. Waverly stirs and groans. What's up? Waverly's voice is groggy with sleep. Look, Nicole gestures beyond the bed of the Jeep. The sun is rising. And that's the end.
Yeah, that was delightfully fluffy. Had a little bit of angst mixed in there. It was a good combo of
Angst.
angst and fluff. Flunkst. You call it
Yeah,
flunkst?
yep,
Flunkst. Okay. That was some great flunkst. It was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, let's see. Moving right along here. Our next reader is the incredibly prolific and now published author, Boots and Cats.
Hi.
Boots, hi.
Sorry, my voice just broke. I'm so nervous.
Oh, no, don't need to be nervous. This is good practice for you when you go on your book tour.
Oh, God, nightmare. Okay.
Don't worry, because we'll probably still be in quarantine, so it'll be just you inside the bookstore.
Yeah, this quarantine has really saved me from a lot of awkward bookstore moments, so.
So at least there's that.
Yeah.
Got that going for it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to turn the stage over to you, my friend.
Okay, cool. I'm just reading a new thing, so hopefully it's okay. The first time Nicole showed up at their window, Waverly was 3.5. It's the earliest memory she could recall. It had been the eve of Winona's 7th birthday, and Willa had decided to sneak out to be with her friends. Waverly didn't remember much from that night because, well, she was 3. But she remembered she'd insisted on sleeping in Winona's bed because Daddy had been yelling that night, and she didn't like it when he yelled. especially when it meant Winona had a bruise the next morning. So it was when she was sleeping in Winona's bed when a copper-haired girl flew through the window, literally flew through the small window, which made no sense since Willa had always told Waverly that her fairy tales weren't real, and surely flying wasn't real either. Like an uncoordinated bird, the girl perched in the windowsill. She was mostly silhouetted, but Waverly could make out a green smock of some sort, patchwork, and made out of varying shades, that was secured around her waist with a leather belt that was too big for her body. There was some sort of small knife tucked into the leather and dark pants that led to well-worn moccasins. Something about her was mesmerizing, but with fear and excitement thrumming through Waverly's veins, she pulled the sheet up to her nose as Winona stirred beside her, sitting up in the bed. "Hey, what are you doing?" Winona said as she got out of the bed, grabbing the baseball bat she kept next to her. "Get out of here." Winona swung the bat in front of her menacingly, but the girl in the window just smiled. With the moonlight streaming through the window, Waverly saw 2 dimples pop on the girl's cheeks. She had short red hair that rested along her jaw and long, gangly limbs. It was hard to tell, but she seemed even older than Winona, and Waverly wondered if she should scream for Willa or Daddy. The red-headed girl jumped to avoid the bat, but stayed floating in the air, smile still present on her face. "I just wanted to say hi," the red-headed girl said. She frowned and looked around the room for a moment. "You weren't who I was expecting, but my name is Nicole." Winona stared, Waverly still frozen in shock in the bed. "Wait, I remember you," Winona said. "My mama, she used to tell stories about you." "Michelle?" Nicole's smile brightened. "Is she here?" A quiet sadness came over Winona and Waverly. She pulled her comforter to her chest, eyes trained on her older sister. Even at 3, Waverly could see the mask slide over Winona's face when she realized her little sister was looking at her, only 7 and already figuring out how to hide her emotions from the world, how to protect people. "Mama isn't here," Winona said simply. "So you two don't have a mom?" Nicole asked, head tilted. "I'm basically Waverly's mom," Winona said, tiny chest puffing. Nicole just hummed, attention moving to a stuffed bear on the top shelf of a bookcase in the corner. Nicole's feet lifted from the ground again, and she brought herself to eye level with it. "You're flying," Winona breathed. Nicole shrugged. "Anyone can fly." "I can't fly." "Sure you can." Nicole beamed so brightly it rivaled the moonbeams. "I'll teach you." The baseball bat, previously held up defensively, fell to Winona's side as Nicole gracefully floated back to the ground. What looked like a small fleck of glowing dust zipped through the window and landed on Nicole's shoulder. "This is Tinkerbell." With a noise like a tiny bell, Tinkerbell took off from Nicole's shoulder and flew around Winona's head. Waverly's curiosity got the better of her, and she slowly sat up, sheet falling down to her lap as she stared. The fairy noticed and quickly flew over to Waverly. It felt like she flicked her on the forehead, and sparkles fell off of the tiny creature and landed on Waverly's nose, making her sneeze. When she blinked her eyes back open, Tinkerbell was hovering in front of her, so close that Waverly could finally get a better look at her. There was a vague shape of an adult woman, but it was hard to make out with the way that her body glowed so brightly. She looked more like a ball of sparkles and light. Waverly wanted to reach for her, but feared the repercussions and just kept her hands to herself. "Waves, you're up." Winona ran to the edge of the bed, excitement apparent even in the low light. Waverly leaned over and pulled the chain to turn the lamp, casting a harsh and tall shadow over the room. Usually they scared Waverly, but tonight they just seemed to be pointing to the red-headed girl in the middle of the room. "This girl can fly." "Here, you can too," Nicole said, snatching Tinkerbell out of the air. She held her in the palm of her hand up to her face and blew. Gold sparkles flew out of her palm like dust, landing on Winona and Waverly's faces. It tingled, kind of like when a light rain hit your face, just barely registering, but definitely there. Waverly felt an itch in her nose and sneezed, shaking her head and blowing herself back a little with the force. When she blinked her eyes back open, Winona was standing on the edge of the bed. Her arms were out like a bird, toes curled against the edge of the mattress as she bent her knees in preparation for flight. Waverly watched as Winona launched herself from the bed, floating in the air for a second, before falling to the floor with a heavy thud. "It didn't work," Winona pouted from the floor. Nicole laughed and offered her hand to her. "Winona, you have to think a happy thought. You can't just fly." Winona grumbled and closed her eyes. "It's still not working." "Really think. When were you the happiest?" Nicole said, her own feet already floating a foot off the ground as she smiled. Waverly squeezed her own eyes shut tight, trying to think of her own happiest moment. Her new rabbit toy she got from Winona for Christmas? She opened her eye and looked at it nestled near the pillow. No. The other day when they had ice cream for dinner because Winona had to make them food when Willa was gone? She thought about it real hard, eyes squeezed shut and images of ice cream with cereal sprinkled on top in her head. but she could still feel herself firmly planted on the mattress. Whoa. Waverly opened her eyes and saw Winona floating about a foot off the ground. See, you can fly, Nicole said, quickly flying around the room. Nicole watched in amazement as Winona flapped her arms like a bird as she tried to move through the room and follow Nicole. She was so busy watching the two girls fly around the room and giggling that she didn't bother trying to take off herself. Winona and Nicole flew over Waverly's head before they stumbled onto the floor together, both giggling. Winona, Nicole said, excitement shining in her eyes in the dull light of the room. Come with me. Where? Neverland. Waverly gasped, clinging onto the bedspread under her. She remembered that name from the stories Winona had told her. She'd always told Waverly they were Mama's stories, but Waverly would just have to take her word for it. Are there still pirates there? Sure are. Nicole's smile got wider and Tinkerbell landed on her shoulder. Let's go. All right. Winona bounced to her feet, but the joy that was apparent on her face was gone in seconds when she looked at Waverly on the bed. But, Waverly, can she come? Nicole looked over at Waverly, and for a moment it felt like she was lifting off the mattress. She's a bit young, Nicole said as she put her hands on her hips, leaning forward to scrutinize Waverly. She might get lost. Let's just go you and me for now. Winona looked guiltily at Waverly and back at Nicole. We're coming back, right? Sure, Nicole smiled. Winona looked back at Waverly, twisting the end of her sleep shirt in her hands. It was a few more looks between Waverly and Nicole before Winona finally fell to her knees in front of her. I'll be back. Okay, baby girl, Winona whispered. It's just pirates and magic. Winona's childish excitement came off of her in waves. And if it's safe, I'll come back to get you and we'll go together, okay? Away from purgatory, away from Daddy, just you and me. Waverly just nodded, stomach aching and throat tightening as tears clouded her eyes. Winona's image swam in front of her like when she was lying in the tub and tried to open her eyes underwater. Waverly quickly wiped at her eyes as Winona placed a kiss on her forehead. Be strong, Waves. I'll be back. Waverly sniffled and nodded, watching as Winona and Nicole stood on the windowsill together. Winona gave Waverly one last wave before Nicole launched out the window, tugging on Winona's hand and pulling her with her. Waverly's heart lurched in fear to see her sister fall from the window, but she wasn't falling. She was flying. Waverly continued to watch, their shadows getting smaller against the moonlight until Waverly couldn't see them anymore. But she kept staring until her eyes started to droop. And as she drifted to sleep, she wished for Winona to get back before the sun came up. Winona was gone for 3 days. Neither Willa nor Daddy seemed to notice at first. It was only when Waverly cried and she said she was hungry that they seemed to be aware of Winona's absence. Probably out in the woods again, her daddy slurred before making Waverly a dry bowl of cereal. When Winona did come back, it was a whirlwind of excitement, wearing different clothes and with a new knife tucked in her belt. It flipped open with a handle that looked like bone, and she wouldn't let Waverly touch it no matter how much she begged. Winona told everyone who would listen about Neverland. Willa told her to stop lying, and then Winona hit her, which led to a fight. Daddy ended up locking Winona in her room for a day, but at least Willa felt bad enough to bring her some food. Even after all that, she still told Waverly the stories every day. Great fantastical tales about pirates and shadows lurking in a magical forest, of lost boys and mermaids and magic. The stories about mermaids were always Waverly's favorite. Every year Nicole came back, and every year Waverly was left behind. Winona always said, maybe next year, and Waverly would wait with bated breath for the next time Nicole would come, hoping Winona would finally take her with them. She had spent too much time cooped up in her room and dreaming about the girl with copper-red hair, wondering when she would come for her. One night, when Waverly was 7, she heard a small commotion in Winona's room, but Winona was staying over at her friend Mercedes' house that night and wasn't there. Waverly knew exactly what was happening in Winona's room and practically ran across the hall and skidded in. Sure enough, Nicole was perched on the post of Winona's bed, blanket lifted up in her hand as she looked under it. As soon as Nicole looked up at Waverly, a smile bloomed on her face, and Waverly felt her stomach tingle. It kind of felt like when that boy in her class named Champ held her hand and told her she was pretty, but this was stronger, almost like she was going to be sick. Nicole, she said breathlessly. The dimples in Nicole's cheek deepened, and she felt her knees weaken. You're here. I'm here every year, Nicole said with a tilt of her head. At least, I think it's a year. Give or take, Waverly shrugged like she didn't have a calendar kept under her bed where she marked every day that Nicole had been to visit. She would doodle little hearts around the days and hope she'd be back soon. You're older, Nicole said, floating down to Winona's comforter with her legs crossed. Tinkerbell landed on her shoulder, a glowing ball of light, and Waverly suddenly wished she could be that close to Nicole. She got onto the bed, knees under her. She got as close to her as she dared. but her knees barely brushed Nicole's and she felt herself blush and scrambled back a little bit. I'm 7, Waverly said proudly. Can I go now? Where's Winona? Nicole asked. Waverly huffed. She left. She always leaves without me. Well, I suppose you can go this time. Waverly's heart palpitated in her chest, excitement thrilling up her spine as she smiled. Okay. She didn't waste a second, running into her bedroom, into her closet, where she kept a small backpack full of things she wanted to take with her. She'd made the bed the second year Winona left without her. Waverly was going to be ready when it was her chance, and now she was. As she ran back into Winona's room, she adjusted the straps of her backpack on her shoulders and found Nicole standing on the windowsill with the same wide, dimpled smile Waverly thought about at night. Waverly rushed up to her, and Tinkerbell flew over her, dropping some pixie dust as she went. Nicole extended her hand, and Waverly slid easily into it, stomach getting all tingly again. Just the touch made Waverly begin to float off the ground, and she giggled. Hazel eyes trained on Nicole's face. Ready, Waverly? Nicole asked softly, both of them flying just on the inside of the bedroom. Yeah, Waverly whispered. Nicole tugged her along outside the window, and they flew into the night sky. Don't leave me here, Waverly pleaded to Nicole, hands around her wrists and tears on the corners of her eyes. I have to, Nicole said, cupping Waverly's cheek. You're needed. Waverly shook her head. I'm not. You are. I'm not, Waverly said, angrily wiping tears with a dirty sleeve. Willa and Daddy certainly don't need me, and Winona is always leaving without me anyways. Nicole offered a sad smile. I'm sorry, little bird, but you are needed, more than you know. Waverly's heart broke at the finality of it all. Will you come back for me, like you've come back for Winona? Of course, Nicole beamed. I'll be back before you know it. Waverly sniffled with a nod, but still kept Nicole's hand in her own. I want to give you a kiss. Nicole's face wrinkled out of curiosity. A kiss? Yeah, do you not know what a kiss is? Nicole got offended and crossed her arms over her chest. No, of course I know what a kiss is. It's a... Nicole patted her pockets and pulled a button shaped like an acorn, holding it out to Waverly with a smirk. See? A kiss, right? Waverly giggled through her tears and pulled her backpack in front of her, digging through the small pocket in the front bag where her fingers brushed something cold. Closing it in her palm, she pulled it out and held it out to Nicole. In the center of her hand was an old silver thimble. Waverly had found it years ago when she was going through her mother's old sewing kit, looking for any shred left behind from her, something to hold on to. A kiss for a kiss, Waverly smiled, heart flipping in her chest as Nicole's fingers brushed against the palm of her hand to take the thimble. A kiss for a kiss, Nicole said, replacing the thimble with the button. Waverly closed her hand around it with a sigh, feeling the hard metal imprint into her hand. Until next year, then? Until next year, Waverly, Nicole winked before disappearing back into the night. The following year, Waverly looked out the window of Sheriff Nedley's car towards the homestead. The red and blue police lights illuminated the front of the house, officers milling about as they placed sheets over 2 bodies laying on the ground in front. Waverly felt sick to her stomach and looked over at Winona, who was sitting, staring at her hands with wide eyes. Officer Nedley pulled open the driver's door of the cruiser and slid inside with a deep sigh. He sat silently in the front for a moment before turning to look at the 2 girls in his back seat. Girls, I'm going to take you back to the station and your Aunt Gus will be there, okay? We'll just need to ask you a couple of questions and then you can go home. Then you can go with your aunt. Waverly just looked back towards the homestead, all lit up with colorful lights in a way that would be pretty if it weren't for the slain bodies of her daddy and Willa on the front porch. If it weren't for the tears clouding her vision and streaming down her face, she might have noticed the silhouette of a copper-haired girl flying to Winona's still open window. Done.
Oh, wow, that was so cool, Boots. That was so cool. Gosh, you make me want to sing show tunes from the musical Peter Pan. That was so wonderful. Where did you get this idea? It's fantastic.
Well, there was like a Twitter post, I think it was by Purgatory Archaeological Society, that they posted about the different characters as Peter Pan, or different Winona characters as Peter Pan characters.
Uh-huh.
And then I just started thinking about it, but it's not going to be the typical Peter Pan story. It's going to be, I kind of say it's kind of like Enchanted and Peter Pan in the same thing, but.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. That's fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.
Okay, so moving right along, now that we are a little bit lighter in our hearts, despite the of course, here's what I love about Boots. Okay, sorry, Boots. I'm gonna gush for a second. Here's what I love about Boots. Boots will write a story. You think it's going one way, and then they're just like, no, I'm just gonna take it and go. So if you think you know what's gonna happen, you don't know what's gonna happen, and that's what I love about Boots and their work. It's awesome. Okay, so moving right along, we're gonna hop next to our next author. Sorry, I'm still thrown by what a fantastic story that was, Boots. Our next author is Goose Claws. So I'm gonna take you off mute, Goose. Okay, there we go. Where you should be. Yeah, there you are. Okay. I think we were toggling each other there. Welcome to the reading. Thank you for volunteering to read this evening. I'm excited to hear what you have for us. And so with that, I'm going to stop yapping at everybody and turn the mic over to you.
All right, thank you. So I will be reading an upcoming chapter from my multi-chapter fic that I'm posting right now, Fragments. So this is not the chapter posting this Saturday, but it's coming up in April. I'll just say that. So it's a little bit edited, so there's not too many spoilers for people who aren't reading it. But if you aren't, you should. But all right, I'll just dive right in. It doesn't mean anything good for a guy like that to just up and disappear, said Nicole, pacing in front of a wall of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves in the Earp's study. Wynonna sprawled on the couch, her booted feet kicked up on one plush arm. What the hell is that weasel playing at? I wish he'd just show his ugly face so I could shoot it. Waverly sat cross-legged in an armchair, a book balanced on her knees. She'd retreated to the study for some peace and quiet. When Nicole found her, she'd allowed the intrusion. Nicole knew when to be quiet, even if worry clouded around her like musk. She'd given Waverly a nod before entertaining herself, studying the old leather spines of the hundreds of books on display. Nicole was more of a distraction than Waverly had anticipated. She'd caught herself looking up from her book, her gaze drifting to Nicole, to her pushed-up shirt sleeves straining over her arms, to her lip trapped between her teeth in concentration, to her slender, strong fingers tapping an aimless beat against the shelves. Then Wynonna had stomped in, and Waverly's little moment of peace was gone. If you get a single smudge on that couch, Will is going to kill you, said Waverly. She can try, said Wynonna. Her head lolled toward Waverly. Forget her, though. What do you think about this revenant shit? Waverly shrugged. I don't know. I guess I'm nervous knowing he's out there, but there isn't anything I can do until Nicole finds him again. Okay, but you're acting like everything is normal. Seriously, it's freaking me out that you're not more worried. Waverly slammed her book shut. You two worry enough for an army. I don't see the point of adding to it. And anyway, I think Nicole and I have my safety handled. Maybe Nicole does, but what if Nicole's not with you? You're basically defenseless. Wynonna gestured to Waverly in her entirety, to her short stature and small frame. Annoyance flared across Waverly's cheeks. What if I just start carrying Gus's shotgun around? Will that make you feel better? Because that's not extremely illegal or anything, said Nicole. Wynonna plowed ahead, brimming with years' worth of unused older sister condescension. You still don't actually know how to shoot. I would if you would let me leave the house to go practice on my own. Nicole groaned. Did nobody hear me before? Open carrying without a permit? Super illegal? No one? Waverly glanced at Nicole, and an idea sprang into her mind. What if Nicole teaches me self-defense? What? Nicole abandoned her attempt to wear a trail into the carpet by the bookshelves to stand between Waverly and Wynonna. What makes you think I can teach you? You were a cop, said Waverly, frowning. That's not... Nicole, shh, Waves, I love this idea. I'm so glad you turned out so smart. Wynonna popped upright, her boots clomping on the floor. Nicole can keep you out of trouble, and you can learn how to break all of that asshole's fingers if he tries to pull anything. As she headed out of the room, Wynonna clapped Nicole on the shoulder. Thanks for volunteering, Hot. Nicole flinched as the door slammed, then turned to Waverly with a pained expression. Waverly traced the edge of her book, found the ribbon spilling from between the pages, and worried it between her fingers. Sorry, is that, if you can't actually teach me, that's fine. No, it's, Nicole rubbed the back of her neck. Okay, so I just want to make sure. You're serious? You didn't just say that to get her to leave? I mean, I did, but I actually kind of like the idea. Waverly's eyes skimmed the wrinkled outline of Nicole's shirt, the suggestion of the woman within. It wouldn't hurt, right? I guess not. Really, if you don't want to, you don't have to. Waverly held her breath. Her heart told each moment that passed as dread and hope waged war within her. The silence stretched as thin as gossamer, so delicate that Waverly was sure each moment would be its last. Finally, Nicole broke it, a shadow lurking behind her eyes. I can teach you. It's just... She shook her head and smiled. I'm being silly. Let's do it. The shadow lingered in Nicole's smile. Something hid behind it, something Waverly desperately wanted to see. Waverly felt an urge, like the weight of a wave crashing over her, to stagger toward the shore of Nicole's arms. She would pull Nicole toward her, hold her just for a moment, and find the truth of that smile in the language of Nicole's beating heart. She anchored herself to her chair. Nicole, oblivious, nodded. Come by my house tomorrow morning and we'll get started. Her smile blossomed, bright and eager. Pulling her knees up and opening her book across them again, Waverly let her smile grow alongside Nicole's. All right, she said. I'm looking forward to it. She stood on Nicole's porch in leggings and a tank top. Despite the winter coat draped over everything, she shivered, folding in on herself to trap as much heat as possible. She counted the seconds since she'd knocked, then ripped one hand free from her pocket, balled it into a fist, and wailed on the door again. There was a clattering inside, a muttered curse, and the door opened to reveal Nicole in shorts and a sports bra, one sock halfway on, clinging to the door frame and breathing heavily. Waverly took a step back. Hey, said Nicole. She glanced down at herself and winced. Sorry, I wasn't ready. Normally I'd be ready on time. It's fine, said Waverly, reeling in her eyes every time they tried to flicker down. It was going to give her a headache. It's really cold out here. Oh, right, of course. Come in, said Nicole, rapid fire. She stood aside and Waverly brushed past her. Nicole shut the door and they stood in the hall, staring at each other. Waverly failed to stop her eyes drifting down to Nicole's stomach. Her gaze rested there quite pleasantly until she remembered herself. She yanked her attention up and away as hard as she could, only to find Nicole watching her. Nicole's teeth grazed her bottom lip, her eyebrows pulled tight, and her eyes searched Waverly's. It wasn't until Nicole let out a breath like a sudden squall that Waverly realized her own breath had been trapped too. So I'm going to go put a shirt on, Nicole gestured with her thumb behind her. If you head down the hall, my exercise room's on the right. Then she turned on her heel and sprinted up the stairs. Waverly wandered into the room Nicole had indicated. She found workout equipment pushed up against the wall, a few mats laid on the ground. She stepped onto a mat and started warming up. Her body moved like clockwork. It left her mind free to wander, turning over a memory like hard candy on her tongue. The memory of Nicole framed within the door, shirtless, breathless, captivating. Nicole entered, now in a tank top of her own, and joined Waverly. Her brows knit in concentration, her muscles flexed, every curve of her body drawn in sharp outline. She was fluidity. She was focus. She was strength. Familiar, unwanted yearning tickled the edges of Waverly's awareness, calling to her like a siren's song. She didn't realize she was staring until Nicole paused and started explaining her motions, as if she thought Waverly was trying to figure out how to stretch for the first time. Waverly didn't correct her. She kept staring. When they finished what was likely the most efficient warm-up of Waverly's life, judging by the breakneck patter of her heart, they faced each other in the center of the mat, and Nicole began to teach. Waverly had underestimated just how much touching there would be. Nicole ran through an explanation of a body's weak spots and natural weapons, calling Waverly's attention to each with a brush of her fingers on Waverly's skin, or by offering herself up to Waverly's touch. Waverly tried to follow along, forcing herself to ask questions despite the haze clouding her mind, and Nicole rewarded her with dimpled smiles and breathy laughs. Once, when Nicole drew Waverly's hand close and laid it just beneath her own ribs, her explanation of elbows and strikes and solar plexuses stuttered to a halt. Her breath caught. Her hand tightened over Waverly's, binding them together, and Waverly's heart hammered in answer to a question that never came. Nicole exhaled. The lesson resumed. Waverly thought she must have imagined it. They moved on to demonstrations of different techniques. Nicole's hand wrapped around Waverly's wrist. Her grip was as strong as Waverly had imagined that first night in the bar. Waverly's pulse beat against Nicole's fingertips, choked and fast. She fought free of Nicole again and again until Nicole was satisfied with her progress and Waverly was anything but satisfied. Another exercise. Nicole snatched a handful of Waverly's shirt in her fist, hauling her in. Waverly looked up, so close she could just catch the light skipping and shimmering in the striations of Nicole's eyes. Her breath went stale in her lungs, and she hid her gasp as she twisted free of Nicole's grip. They talked as they went. Waverly listened, storing everything. Each new bit of information she tagged with an accompanying memory. A flutter of eyelashes, a bead of sweat on a collarbone, a grunt as Waverly shoved Nicole away. Then Nicole grabbed Waverly from behind, arms lassoed around her waist. Blood pounded in Waverly's ears. Electricity coursed over her skin. She nearly went limp as her mind raced to hide her reaction and cut all power to her body in desperation. She braced herself against Nicole's arms and cursed her clammy palms. "You okay?" asked Nicole, her voice loud, her lips stirring eddies in the air just beyond Waverly's ear. "Fine," Waverly's voice eked through her constricting throat. Nicole's laugh rumbled through their joined bodies. She shifted, just a little, and Waverly thanked every ancient god she could think of that Nicole couldn't see her eyes fluttering closed or her lips parting for a barely caught gasp. Nicole continued, blissfully unaware. "I know it's awkward, but you won't learn it as well without hands-on practice. So, what could you do to get out of this?" Waverly stammered through the possibilities. Stomp on her attacker's foot, deliver an elbow to the stomach, skull bash the nose. Nicole held on, nodding as Waverly rattled off her list. Her chest expanded and contracted, the strength of her grip on Waverly undulating with each breath. Something flashed through Waverly's mind, the first threads of half-realized fantasy. Lips on her neck, fingers spreading, sliding, descending. Waverly's hand reaching up to tangle in red hair. With a yelp, Waverly drove her elbow back and stumbled forward when Nicole dropped her. She turned to find Nicole doubled over, wheezing, hands clutching her torso. "Good," said Nicole. "That was..." She stood straight, sucking down a deep breath. "That was good, but no more body strikes like that without protective gear, okay? I like my kidneys unpulverized." "I'm so sorry," said Waverly, but Nicole waved her off. "I'm fine, really." Nicole rested her hands on her hips. Waverly wiped sweat from her forehead, and Nicole gave her a gentle smile. "You look pretty beat. We've been working on this for a while. How about we call it for today? I'll get my hands on some padding, and then you can practice more. Really put some force into it." "Sure," said Waverly, whose shortness of breath had not come from the lesson. As she left Nicole's, grimacing against the cold, she wondered, could it really be called a self-defense class if it was going to kill her? And that's the end.
That was awesome, Goose.
Thank you.
Oh, what wonderful, delightful torture. Thank you so much for sharing that. I am excited to introduce our final author of this evening, and what I believe is our only explicit reading for this evening. Take Smug off mute. Yes, so Smug Mischief, welcome to the... Why aren't you unmuting? Stop remuting yourself. Okay, stop it. I will handle it.
It was asking me if I wanted to be unmuted, and I said yes, and that's why it kept doing that.
Oh, darn. Okay.
Hello.
Hello. And welcome. I'm excited to cap this evening off with something that I'm assuming is going to be delightfully smutty.
Just a trifle off color, as in the whole thing.
A trifle off color. Okay.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah. Do you want to get started?
Yeah. You know what? What am I standing in the way for? Yes, absolutely. The floor is yours. Go for it.
All right. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Slug, and AKA Miss Chieftess on AO3. I'm going to read to you some never before seen scenes or scene from the next arc in the Enchanting the Night Commander series. I've been working on this for a very long time, and this is an excerpt from the first chapter. Just FYI for those who aren't familiar with my work, this is ABO, so Nicole does have a little piece of extra equipment. So just don't be shocked when that crops up partway through. All right. Nicole had hardly settled into her chair, hoping to get some work done with the brazier taking off the edge of the chill seeping in from the dark windows, when her plans for the evening were permanently diverted. The day faded hours ago and left her office gloomy, dim, lit only by the mage lights in the ceiling and a candelabra on her. A quiet click sounded in her office, preceding the subtle billowing of the tapestry on the wall. Nicole dropped her quill in the inkwell and scooted her chair away from the desk, preparing to rise. Then Waverly's soft scent filled her nostrils as the Omega swept away the cloth and smiled at her, her eyes crinkling in the way they did when she was enjoying a private joke. Her hair was down, waves tumbling over her shoulders as if she'd been out in the windy weather. "Waverly," Nicole said, hearing the affection in her own voice. "To what do I owe this visit?" "I just thought I'd stop by," Waverly hummed. She sauntered forward, the swing in her hips pulling Nicole's gaze downward. The robes she wore weren't standard issue. They were cut far too low in the chest for that, fitting much too well to have been anything but Waverly's own work, cut out of the cloth she'd bought with her earnings from the last merchant of the fall. Nicole was certain that the bodice was meant to be lined with something, some item of underclothes to make it more demure. But at the moment, it bared the most tempting curves, dipping low to show off Waverly. "Your dress is beautiful," Nicole said, watching Waverly's approach. Nicole's reaction to the sight of that skin, unblemished except for the scarred arc of Nicole's bite, blanching against the steadily rising blush creeping Waverly's chest, told Nicole that it had been far too long since they had touched, and even longer since they'd... Nicole firmly reminded herself that 3 days was not too long, but her body, her alpha, didn't agree. And of course, she didn't examine too closely the fact that she knew exactly when the last time was, down to the minute. Since Waverly had left while it was still dark that very morning, after calming Nicole to sleep from her nightmares, Nicole hadn't had a chance to make it less than 3 days. Until now, that is. "Thank you, Night Commander. I had hoped to show it off to you in private first." Waverly rounded the desk, running her hand along the smooth wood of the edge. Nicole felt lightheaded all of a sudden, like she was watching this approach from outside her own body. The floral, heady, olfactory assault of Waverly's Omega pheromones hit her like a soft, warm blanket, wrapping her rational mind in a fog of comforting lust. Nicole let her knees fall apart, leaning forward as Waverly stepped between her legs and bent forward for a kiss. The immediate moan surprised Nicole, especially because it came from her own throat. Waverly's lips were soft, the slightest bit chapped, and, as cool fingers tangled in the hair at the nape of her neck, Nicole opened her mouth and invited her Omega inside, tugging on Waverly's bottom lip with her teeth when she moved a hair too slow. Nicole didn't know quite why she was responding this quickly to Waverly's seduction, for seduction it definitely was. Only that Waverly here, with her, was exactly what her alpha wanted, what she wanted in this moment. She reached up and traced the line of Waverly's bodice where it bared soft skin, tasting the gasp it elicited as she tucked her fingers inside to find softer, rarer flesh. Then Waverly was chuckling into her mouth, pulling up her skirts to straddle Nicole's thighs, and Nicole's distraction gained a new height as her cock made its own needs known with a determined throb. Waverly caught Nicole's tongue between her teeth, delivering a little nip, and Nicole let her hand sink to that delicious ass, using her grip to drag Waverly's body up against the laces straining at her crotch. Waverly threw her head back with a surprised whine, her hands braced on Nicole's shoulders for support. Nicole couldn't resist, not when faced with Waverly's unabashed eagerness. She pushed a hand under Waverly's skirts, finding the heated crux of her thighs, poking the underclothes to the side as best she could and letting her fingertips dip into the ambrosia she could already almost taste on the back of her tongue. Waverly's eyelashes fluttered as she released a pleased almost growl and rolled her hips into Nicole's hand, looking down at where their bodies met. Nicole felt the firm nub of her clit glide from fingertips to palm, stroked her fingers through the fresh, hot slickness of her omega, dipped the tip of her middle finger inside. Andraste. Were you thinking of this on the walk up? Nicole asked, swirling her fingers in lazy, undulating strokes that teased the omega, rubbing herself on her hand. Yes, Waverly confessed, lifting her head. Her hair was haloed by the candlelight from atop Nicole's desk, shining a deep red gold, and her pupils were blown wide open, the color of her eyes difficult to discern when they made such narrow bands against the sea of black arousal. Nicole cupped Waverly's chin and kissed her, still drawing her fingertips through liquid warmth that sucked and slid and dripped into her palm, bringing the rhythm of their lips into harmony with the movement of her hand. Waverly pressed harder against her, begging for more, and Nicole let 2 fingers slide inside. It was Waverly's turn to moan into Nicole's mouth, her breaths panting. Good. You're so wet for me, Waverly, Nicole murmured against Waverly's lips, poking her fingers into the swollen spot just where Waverly liked them. The sound Waverly made for her was filthy, deep and needy, and Nicole swallowed it with her lips and teeth. I like it when you're like this, so eager, dripping all over my hand. At the next determined, strong roll of Waverly's hips, Nicole slid out and in again, relishing the hot breath washing over her neck. That's it. Take what you need. You feel so good. Nicole found herself kissing down to her bite, letting her tongue explore the divots as her wrists strained to provide the pressure and motion Waverly wanted, giving her everything she needed. The scents there, soft lavender and honey sweetness and vanilla, Nicole's own vanilla, filled her nose and chest and body with deep urgency. The drive to stake her claim was as strong as ever, couched in abiding contentment. Waverly was hers alone, had the scars of her bite seared into her skin for all to see. Nicole dragged her teeth across the silvery ridges, biting down in soft mimicry of the flesh-tearing bliss of the mating bond. Waverly's hips danced, thrusting herself hard, sinking down to Nicole's knuckles. Lips and teeth touched Nicole's neck, ever so gently, carefully, not pushing or demanding. Nicole knew by now, intellectually, that Waverly needed the reassurance sometimes, wanted the sensation of skin against her own mouth, that it couldn't ever come to fruition. But her alpha side rumbled deep in her chest, a purr that thrummed into the skin under her teeth. Nicole, Waverly mumbled, her lips brushing skin so sensitive that the little hairs on Nicole's neck stood on end and danced. So good for me, Waverly, Nicole hummed, nipping at the damp skin under her mouth. The rustle of cloth couldn't overwhelm the slick sounds of her fingers plunging inside. The sense of Waverly's pheromones couldn't cover the sweet, spicy musk of her cunt. Nicole added another finger, relishing the burn in her forearm, the proof in every sweet little noise that Waverly made that Nicole was satisfying her omega, making her happy, filling her every need. It was a high sweeter than lyrium to make Waverly twitch and grind against her hand, to have the privilege of being the one who was responsible for Waverly's pleasure in this moment. The insistent cramped throb of her own need pulsed with every stroke, pulled into complementary sensitivity by the slow-growing intensity of Waverly's whimpers, the hot moisture of her breath skating over Nicole's neck. You're mine, she growled, groping under the bodice of Waverly's robe to find her breast. My omega, Waverly. She found the nipple and caught it between 2 fingers, rolling it between them. The response was immediate, gratifying, as Waverly's small, urgent sounds fractured the air, huffs of lust-flavored breath filling Nicole's ears as her hips stuttered, grinding deep and hard. I've got you, sunshine. You take me so well, that's right. Hilt yourself on my fingers, just like that. Nicole hummed and resisted the clenching of Waverly's cunt, grinding her fingertips against the thickened patch of sensitive flesh inside Waverly's front wall, dancing her thumb over her clit as she sucked a bright red bruise over her bite. With another little shiver, Waverly's thrusts staggered to a halt, her fingers clutching at Nicole's armor as she let out a choked moan. Beautiful, beautiful, Nicole hummed, soothing her tongue over the love bite. I like the way you come for me, Waverly. Bit by bit, Waverly relaxed. Nicole retrieved her fingers, sliding them inside her mouth to taste. Fuck. Her cock jumped, cramped and eager beneath leather and laces and cloth. She wanted to fumble with her pruned fingers, wrench it out, and take Waverly right there, right now, follow her fingers into all that slick, wet heat. But it was the end of the night, and she was unlikely to finish her work now, not with Waverly curled, warm and recovering against her chest. There were better, warmer, more comfortable, more naked options than that. Waverly? Nicole asked. Waverly responded. Do you want to stay with me tonight? It was a dangerous offer, of course. It always was. Nicole had gotten used to ignoring that fact, smothering the part of her that told her that this was a mistake every single time. Please? Waverly purred. As always, Nicole's inner alpha purred back at Waverly's willingness, her eagerness to share Nicole's bed, her territory. Nicole didn't even bother to squash it anymore. It never did any good. Nicole, however, always liked this part. Want a ride? Absolutely. Nicole shifted and stood, supporting Waverly's ass with one strong hand as Waverly wrapped her arms and legs around her, then reaching out to the candelabra only to watch it extinguished by a pulse of magic right before her eyes. She chuckled. Eager? You know it. Waverly ground against Nicole's crotch, no doubt smearing herself all over the leather. Nicole ached. Now, Waverly said, giddy up, my stallion. Nicole kissed the top of Waverly's head, then turned and left her papers for tomorrow. She had something much more pressing to attend to. The end.
Oh, dude, you're gonna leave it there? Whoa.
I am going to leave it there.
I think you killed most of the people in this room.
I'm so glad to hear it. That's
Yes.
always my goal.
Yes, mission accomplished. Mission accomplished. Right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. It took us a few tries to get it sorted. I've learned so much now about Zoom security, and when we do this again, and we will be doing this again, I guarantee that any troll will have a far more difficult time trying to get in here. We're gonna do the password thing again. I'm gonna make it so that no one can share their screen. It's gonna be a whole thing. The waiting room worked out well, I think, and yes, so thank you so much for your patience this evening, everyone, and thank you for trying again and again as we kept trying to relaunch this thing over and over. But ultimately, third time was the charm. We made it. We've done it. I want a huge thank you to all of our authors, everyone who read on Wednesday night, our authors who read this evening, and I am just absolutely thrilled. And as a little treat for you guys, I have someone here who I'd like to introduce to the room. Come here, my darling. This is official EFA baby. Quietly behaving herself like a good radio baby should. So thank you so much again. And she did not listen to anything. I've got everything through my headset. Thank you very much. I'm a good mom. Thank you. So you guys have a fantastic night. I will have this posted to YouTube at some point next week, and eventually it'll go up as a special podcast episode. But until then, and until the next time, remember, read more fic.